Okay, I think we are ready. We have the quorum of the Animals Committee, so I would like to start this afternoon's proceedings with agenda item 31 on West African vultures. And for this, I would give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce the document. Yeah. I come back to what I just said. Forget what I said, because I promised we would now start with summary records and the first come documents, of course. So I put it back. So we are looking at document AC33 Sum 2, so the summary document, summary record of Monday, 15th of July. I open the floor for any comments on this, and noting that the executive summary is just the summary of what has been decided. So normally we only look if what is reflected is the correct result. So we are not planning to reopen the debate on certain issues, but if there needs to be clarification or if there are errors in it, we can of course correct them. So with this, I open the floor for any comments on AC33 Sum 2. I see the nomenclature specialist has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. At the top of page 3, in the list of IGOs and NGOs that are part of the working group, and I think this is item 14.3, which starts on page 2. On page 3, in the names, there are two errors in how the names are given. One is Bundesverband. It should not have the first R. It is Bundesverband. It's kind of halfway through. And then also the proper translation, and I confirmed this with the gentleman present, it should be German Society for Herpetology rather than of Herpetology. And those exact same two changes should also be made on page 4 in item 48, on page 7 in item 15.2, and page 8 in item 45.2, as well as the resulting comdocs, comdocs coming from those. And I won't make this correction further, but it is probably occurring throughout. Thank you.
Perfect. It has been captured. Thank you very much, nomenclature specialist. I see Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, sir. A question first of all. Since CITES Benitez was unable to chair the group because he was ill, he appears as the chair of the working group on the review of significant trade. He wasn't able to do that, so maybe that should be changed, but that's a question I have for you. Thank you. And secondly, if I may, on page 8, 45, periodic review. Mexico appears as a member, but unfortunately we were not able to attend that meeting. We were in the Sharks working group, so please take us out of the list of parties, members of the working group under 45. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. That's exactly the point. You know, we have decided, I have struck the working group, and Mexico raised its hand, so it's a reflection what was decided. But in the ComDoc, whenever it's going to come back, we can take out Mexico because you were not present then. Okay, good. And it's the same thing for chairing. I mean, we had decided in the meeting that Ezequiel Benitez would be chairing. In the ComDoc, he will not appear. But here it's just a reflection of what we have decided. Okay. I see the Russian Federation asking for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding the discussion on document 15.2, species selected following COP19, actually, as we remember, the issue on amendment made by Germany didn't find a real full agreement. There was no time to reflect on your proposal to adopt it, to agree on it. So we would like to comment on this issue. Thank you.
Yes, but I mean, we have read out the changes and they were agreed in plenary. Everyone has seen them and they were agreed in plenary. So if you have a question on the content, then you go ahead. So Russia, go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So NDF is important under the CITES. At the same time, there are some questions about the proposal made by Germany. So could you clarify and give some more information on what was included in the conservation and threatened status of a species in the respective country? What sources would be considered sufficient, maybe official sources in this case? For example, could it be the red data book adopted by the country, additional information received from the country upon request? So we would like to clarify this information. In this proposal, we do not see yet clarity in the criteria and scope of information. It should be also taken into account that there are national systems for species protection as well as traceability and control of exported products and NDFs. For example, in the Russian Federation, all transboundary trade in sturgeon is controlled by molecular genetic methods, and this system is one of the most developed. Other countries do not have the appropriate level of control. So in this regard, do these proposals seek to assess national systems of trade control and species protection? It is also important to emphasize that these questions may be more relevant to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. Is Germany in a position to answer those questions? May I give the floor to Germany?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We missed a bit the species country combination that is currently discussed. We heard something about sturgeons, but we have.
Can Russia please repeat its questions so that Germany, who made the proposal, can respond to them?
Thank you, Chair. So the main question, the main issue is, could you clarify and give some more information on what is included in the conservation and threatened status of a species in the respective country? What sources would be considered sufficient? Maybe it would be official sources in this case. So we have, could it be the red data book adopted by the country or additional information received from the country upon request? We would like to clarify this information. Thank you.
Okay, so the question is, what kind of information would be sufficient, or what would be considered when we do this analysis of conservation status and threats to the species in the respective countries of origin?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think now I got the question. So it relates to the systematic assessment that should be carried out by a consultant in order to allow parties to make an assessment on whether the offtake of the founder stock used for captive breeding operations may have a detrimental effect on the species, on the survival of the population in the wild. And we were thinking that it would be useful if the consultant would also provide information on the conservation status, which could of course include information included in the IUCN Red List, but also other sources like national Red List, available research, publications, expert opinions. So whatever is suitable could be used. So I think there are no limitations. And yeah, just provide an overview, like a systematic overview, and then it's up to the committee and the parties in the room together with their own expertise to make this final judgment. So it's not on the consultant to do the assessment itself, but just to provide the basic information which is available, and then the committee can decide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, the idea was if a country has breeding facilities of a species that does not occur in that country where the breeding facility is, then it would be, it differs whether in the country of origin where that species comes from has been originated, the founder stock has protection laws on that species, how that species is doing in that country, to be able to say what kind of documents or assertion do we have to have from that country that breeds the species. So it's not an obligation on the country of origin to do anything. It's just to get the information on the status of that species coming from that country. That's all. Yes, Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So how could we understand that these sources are sufficient for request? Thank you.
What is being done with this information is then up to the Animals Committee. When we see such an analysis, we then have to take them into account when we judge what actions we ask that party who is breeding the species to take and what documents we want to see. So this will then be up to the committee to look at this issue and then make further recommendation to the party who is breeding them, not to the country of origin. It's really then up to the committee to decide what we do with this information. Does that clarify the situation?
Yeah, Chair, can we a bit later reflect on it? We will discuss and then reflect on it.
Well, as I said, this has been decided already. It was really now to explain what it means. If you want, after the meeting, we can sit together and I will try to explain further. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. So with this, I see Togo has asked for the floor.
Thank you, sir. Togo has one concern with respect to captive breeding of Centroculus sulcata, which where Togo is not a range state. We have a simple NDF on the status of Centroculus sulcata, and as a result, we do know that captive breeding of the species in Togo is generally in keeping with CITES regulations. There is one problem, however. Togo has a long tortoise sulcata breeding tradition dating back to the 1960s and indeed to pre-independence. At the time, specimens were acquired without anyone necessarily taking CITES regulations into account.
We are not now discussing any specific case. What we are looking at now is if the conclusions of the meeting are adequately reflected. And what you are telling us now is that kind of information that we are with this decision asking Togo to provide to the Secretariat until, what is it, by 30th September of this year. So that kind of information we need to get in writing from Togo to the Secretariat. Here we are only looking whether the decisions we have taken are correctly reflected. Okay? C'est bon? Okay. I now see Cambodia has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to seek the clarification from the colleague from Germany related to the assessment of the founding stock, that she said that this should be conducted by consultant. So the consultant who's going to pay for the consultant, and when that is feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Cambodia. I think we have to be careful not to mix up too many things now. This is a process that is being described in Resolution 17.7, that if we have made a selection of country-species combination, one of the next steps is that a consultant is looking at the available information that is out there in consultation with the range state and so on, to help the Animals Committee make decisions later. So this is part of a process that we have defined in the resolution itself. And if then and about the funding of doing that work, that is actually not core funding, that is funding that has to be provided from somewhere else by a party who wishes to support the Secretariat in doing its work like Switzerland does on many occasions. That's a part of the normal process, it's nothing else. Now I have Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. This has to do with the questions raised by Togo. It is said
we are not going to talk about the case of Senegal and that turtle species. We have taken a decision in plenary, and the question is now, is that decision correctly reflected in this sum document? We are not going to talk about the decision itself. The question is the decision as it is written here reflecting correctly what we have decided in this plenary on Monday?
Oui, je voudrais seulement...
I understand, sir. All I wanted to say was that with respect to the decision mentioned here on Centrochelis sulcata, it is said that has not been discussed. It was supposed to be discussed in the working group, but unfortunately that did not happen. And that is why the representative of Togo wanted to understand the situation better.
Not discussed in the working group because the working group didn't get a mandate to look at it. In the other case, from that document that we did discuss in the working group, we did get a clear mandate. But when we introduced that document, there was no discussion and request to look at this in the working group. So that's why it wasn't looked at in the working group. There was no request from the plenary to look at it in the working group. So if that has not happened, then the decision as proposed in the document stands, and that's what I read out in detail, and there was no opposition to that decision. That's why it was not looked at in the working group. Okay, any more changes or requests for the floor on AC 33 Sum 2? So thank you, then this is agreed. So it is adopted, like agreed, yeah. Okay, then we turn our attention to AC 33.1, the report of the in-session working group on trade in stony corals, and I would give the floor to the chair of this working group to introduce COM1. So Central South America and the Caribbean, you have the floor.
The Trade in Stony Corals Working Group met yesterday, and the parties that were involved in the discussions included, I want to read through all of these names. These are already in the document itself, and the IGOs and NGOs. I'll go straight into the mandate. Taking into consideration the comments made in plenary, the working group shall consider the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10, Rev Cop 15, and Sections 3 and 6, subsection A of the Guidelines for the Preparation and Submission of CITES Annual Reports, and Section 4A of the Guidelines for the Preparation and Submission of CITES Annual Illegal Trade Reports. The second mandate was to provide advice on the conversion factors used to analyze trade in corals for the review of significant trade process. And finally, the mandate was also to report its recommendations to the Animals Committee. So there were a lot of discussions during the working group session. A lot of recommendations were made. And the definitions for the various coral and its products were discussed and agreed on, and it's found in Annex 1 in the document, which included the definitions for coral sand, coral skeletons, fragments, coral rock, live coral, substrate, dead coral, live coral. And in terms of the code for the descriptions and for the trade codes, we had also agreed on what is live coral, and all of these has its explanations in the document itself. So parties are, or just interested parties and other bodies from range and consumers states to collaborate and provide support on these matters. And the recommendation is that the Animals Committee should submit these to the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting of the following: amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10, Rev Cop 15 on trade and territorial as set in the Annex 1 to the present document, and amendments to the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports and guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual illegal trade reports and set out in the Annex 2 to the present document. The working group recommends that the Animals Committee, in its submission to the Standing Committee, notes that should the amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10 Rev Cop 15 on trade in stony corals to include the word skeleton before fragments to read coral skeleton fragments in the annex to the resolution be accepted. This will require consequential amendment to the Resolution Conf 9.6 Rev Cop 19 on trade in readily recognizable parts and derivatives, paragraph 3, subsection E. The working group further recommends that the Animals Committee should submit the following draft decisions for consideration of the Conference of Parties at its 20th meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the in-session working group. Mauro, thank you very much for the presentation of this document. I open the floor for any comments on that document and the recommendations. I see the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the Chair and the members of the in-session working group for the informative and constructive discussions that were held. We also thank the Secretariat for presenting the recommendations of the working group in AC 33.1. However, we have an amendment to propose. On further reflection, we don't think the following wording should be deleted from the definition of coral rock in Annex 1 of AC 33.1. Hard consolidated material greater than 3 centimetres in diameter formed of fragments of dead coral and which may also include cemented sand, coralline algae and other sedimentary rocks. We think this wording needs to be retained because the definitions for live rock and substrate refer to coral rock, so it is important that coral rock is clearly defined. We hope this amendment will be acceptable to the Animals Committee. There are also a couple of minor amendments that are needed if the change of coral fragment to coral skeleton fragment is agreed. Firstly, in recommendation B of AC 33.1, it highlights that an amendment would be required to paragraph 3A of Res Conf 9.6. This amendment would also be required in the 6th preambular paragraph of Res Conf 9.6. Secondly, the word skeleton needs to be added before the word fragments in preambular paragraph 9, operative paragraph 1, and the definition of coral skeleton fragments in Res Conf 11.10 in Annex 1 of AC 33.1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, UK. I see the United States. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. While we support the UK intervention, we believe that it highlights the need for additional discussion on this issue. We appreciate the progress made in the working group. However, we are not certain that the current product resolves all of the ambiguities in the definitions, and we will plan to suggest additional amendments at SC 78 to help address remaining ambiguities. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I see New Zealand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. New Zealand supports all the changes the UK has detailed regarding wording in Resolution Conf 11.10 RevCop 15. Thank you.
I see Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Sí, gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. As we mentioned a little while ago, Mexico was unable to participate in the review of significant trade working group, so we would like to have them removed from the list of members. But we do have some good news. We were not able to be in the group, so we couldn't suggest that it be included in the list. A clam, which is
Corals at parties, you do not figure in.
I'm so sorry. Are we in COM 1?
We are on COM 1,
I'm so sorry.
yes.
I'm talking about COM 2. So
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, okay. And I see Australia.
Thank you, Chair. We also appreciate all the constructive discussion within the working group, but agree with the US that further work is probably required on this one, so we would support the US's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Australia. I see Europe. Europe, you have the floor.
It might not be the end of all discussions about this topic, but for the moment I think the addition made by the UK is useful, and until we have something better on the table, I propose to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you for that support. And finally, Portugal.
Thank you, Chair. Well, some of the notes I had were already referred by the UK regarding the inclusion of or using the expression, the complete expression, coral skeleton fragments in all the points we have here. And also to say that regarding the reporting, that there was no clear agreement that the additional unit should be maintained. I just wanted to stress, because in what concerning reporting of live corals in weight is quite strange and regularly not used by the parties. I looked since 2010. The only reporting cases were around 5 or 6 since I tried for one genus, one of the most traded genus as Acropora, and it's not really, and using weight to report specimens transported inside of water, plastic bags with water, it's quite difficult to measure that. Thank you.
Thank you, Portugal. I suppose that has been discussed already quite in depth in the working group as well. So I think these concerns are noted. I then open the floor for observer organizations. I don't see any, so the conclusion would then be what? Oh. Yes, true. The Secretariat wanted to make a short amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, in the mandate of the working group, it was agreed that they would also look at the guidelines for the preparation of submission of CITES annual illegal trade reports, but the Annex-II does not refer to the guidelines for the preparation and submission of annual illegal trade reports. So I just wanted to clarify that this paragraph, this section 6A, would be repeated in the section 4A of the guidelines for the preparation of submission of annual illegal trade report, just so that's clear. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you're a bit late, but I will still give you the floor, European Pet Organization, for a short intervention.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make it quick. If there is further work to be done on this topic, then we would support further consideration for some of the issues that are being raised, in particular related to enforcement and identification issues, which may remain under-resolved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Pet Organization. This is noted. Okay, so the Animals Committee agrees to submit for consideration of the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting the amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10, Ref COP 15, as amended by the UK on trade in stony corals, as set out in Annex 1 to the present document, as amended by the UK. Then Roman 2, amendments to the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports and guidelines for the preparation and submission of the CITES illegal trade report as set out in Annex 2 of the document and amended by the Secretariat. And then B, the Animals Committee will, in its submission to the Standing Committee, note that should the amendments and so on, so this letter B, we will do that. And then letter C, the Animals Committee will submit the following the draft decisions for consideration of the Conference of the Party at its 20th meeting, contained in document AC 33 Com 1. Okay. This concludes the work on stony corals.
It should be as amended by the UK.
Yeah, it's okay.
You need to say that.
Okay, I forgot to say that in the recommendations in letter B, it's also going to be mentioned that it's as amended by the UK, to be clear. Okay? Good. So we now turn our attention to AC 33 Com 2, selection of species for the periodic review. And I would give the floor to Asia or to alternate for Oceania. So Andrew, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Working Group for the Periodic Review of Species included in Appendices 1 and 2 met during the Wednesday morning session. It should be noted that the representative for Asia, Mr. Hamadeh, was required to attend the Review of Significant Trade Working Group and therefore was unable to co-chair. The working group was chaired by the alternate representative for Oceania. It also should be noted that Mexico did not participate in the working group. The mandate of the working group was to establish a schedule for the periodic review of appendices and based on outputs indicated in paragraph 8 of document AC 33 Doc 45.2 Rev 1, identify a list of animal taxa to review during the next intersessional period until COP21 2028 and report its recommendations to the committee. The working group firstly considered the information contained in Output 1 in Annex 1 of document AC33 Doc 45.2 for Appendix 1 species over a 10-year period. Through working group discussions, taking into account such considerations as trade numbers, nomenclature matters, and IUCN Red List status, among other considerations, the working group proposed 3 species for further clarification on the source and purpose of trade to ascertain whether the Appendix 1 listing is being appropriately managed. The working group also considered species in Output 3 and 4 in Annex 1 of the document for Appendix 1 and 2 species where there has been minimal or no trade over a 10-year period. The working group proposed selecting 6 species for potential review. 4 of those species are contained within Appendix 1 and 2 within Appendix 2. Where a range state has volunteered to conduct the review, this is indicated in bold in the table within the working group report. The working group also suggested that an indication of whether illegal trade is taking place with the species could be included in future outputs, as this may assist in the process of selecting species for periodic review. The working group recommendations are contained within the report of the working group AC33 ComDoc 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alternate Representative for Oceania, for the presentation of this working group report. I now open the floor for comments from the members first. I see Central, South America and the Caribbean. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank those who have presented the document. The countries in my region who are here would like to wanted to raise our concern on the concern about trade of the guacamayas in our country and the loss of habitat and climate change which are affecting them in particular. We are particularly concerned about the operations for breeding of these species could be questionable. Now, as range states for these species, we don't think that there's a particular need, in particular Arinco, Yacinquinos and Macao, which are in Table 3, Result 1 of document PC27 Doc 32.2 and the corresponding PC document corresponds to all the criteria for maintaining in the appendix. Thank you.
Sorry, Central, South America and Korea. I didn't quite understand what species you were talking about. Are you talking about Ara Macao?
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. Yes, Ara Macao and Narincos Yacintinos, which are in Table 1.
Okay, but you know, I mean, we are talking about this COM2, and there we don't have the hyacinth macaw in it, so we only have retained Ara Macao, and there we are asking we'll invite the Secretariat to engage with parties relating to the reported trade in the species and request them to verify the source of the specimens. So it's not really something that we will look whether that species is in the correct appendix. It's more something that the Animals Committee has spotted for the Standing Committee to have a look at. Okay, good. I see nomenclature specialist.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the working group for their hard work. Unfortunately, I could not participate, but I just noticed in paragraph 3 in the table, output 4, 2 species were selected, Ovis jubata and Elachistodon westermanni. It is probably helpful for the working group and the subsequent process to note that our nomenclature working group just decided to recommend a change in the name Elachistodon westermanni to Boiga westermanni. So if we can include that name as well, then we are set for COP20. Thank you.
Thank you, nomenclature specialist. So we will put in brackets after Elachistodon Boiga. Okay, good. I see Oceania.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank the working group for this report. And also I'd like to thank Australia for volunteering to do 2 of the 6 species reviews. This is entirely a sort of a voluntary thing, and I think it's great that when parties do take up the opportunity of doing a periodic review, it helps us know whether the species are in the correct place in the appendices. And so I urge the other parties that are noted here in this table in paragraph 3 to take up the offer of doing the periodic review to help the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania, and I align myself with you, of course, and thanking Australia to take up that work. I see Israel.
Thank you, Chair. In looking at this review, we were listed as or selected as a party to be in this working group, but unfortunately, because of things running at the same time, we were not able to participate. So in this report, our name should be removed, even though we were selected. Having said that, I read paragraph 6 that at the end of this COM document. It says that notes an indication of where their illegal trade is taking place may assist in informing the selection. I'm not sure I understand exactly what this paragraph means. And I wasn't in the working group, so I would ask perhaps clarification as to what this paragraph is supposed to mean. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. I would turn to the co-chair, to the chair, actually, alternate from Oceania. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. To provide some clarification on that particular paragraph, the working group felt when looking at the Appendix 1 and 2 species where there had not been trade for the past 10-year period, that it would be useful to understand within that list whether the species are subject to illegal trade and therefore would help selection of species that could be proposed to be removed off the appendices. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So as an additional indication that if there is no legal and no illegal trade, that maybe it might merit removal, or if there is no legal but there is illegal trade, it may warrant to be kept in the appendices. Okay, to have other arguments. Okay, good. I see Mexico.
Yes. Gracias, señor presidente. Ahora sí.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the chair of the working group for taking Mexico's not being there. As I was not there, it was not possible to mention an species endemic to Mexico, and this is an endemic clam. The interpreter apologizes, but the name of the species of this clam has escaped her. This is in the table, the list on table 4 of output 3. So we would like to offer to carry out the periodic review.
So can you please repeat the species name, because I think our interpreters had problem hearing it clearly. So can you please repeat the species name?
Claro que sí.
Unio tampicoensis tecomamentensis. It is an endemic species, which is Appendix 1 listed, and the interpreter thanks you.
So I have India.
Thank you, Chair. India wish to thank the Chair and the members of the in-session working group on selection of species for the periodic review, and appreciates the work carried out by the working group and the Secretariat for developing the AC 33 COM Doc 2. With reference to the species listed under output 4 of the table of recommendations, paragraph 3 of document AC 33 COM Doc 2, India wish to inform that we had amended the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 recently, wherein the schedules to the Act listing species was also amended. As per the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Elachistodon westermanni, which is now shifted to genus Boiga, is listed in Schedule 1 and is accorded highest degree of protection from hunting and trade. India is therefore of the view that the species be retained in the appendices of CITES and for regulation of the trade in the species, and a review of this species may not be further proceeded with. Thank you, Chair.
I see IWMC has asked for the floor. IWMC, you have the floor.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, sir. With reference to the nomenclature specialists' intervention, as I understand it, he was asking that the name Elachistodon westermanni name be changed.
Suggested is to add after Elachistodon in brackets Boiga, but the whole thing is now, I mean, one of the range states already mentioned that they will not support any change and the removal of that species, so I think we can already now remove that species from that table, because there is no support from the range states, so also the nomenclatural issue is not relevant anymore. Okay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Okay, so we have in the document we have changed the chairmanship to just the alternate representative for Oceania, and parties we have struck out Israel and Mexico. And the Animals Committee is agreeing to recommend all these recommendations 1 through 6, but there is a change in paragraph 3. In the table of paragraph 3, we will remove the species Elachistodon westermanni and replace it with Onei tampicoensis, tecomatensis, and from Appendix-I and range state Mexico. And we can put Mexico in bold, as it has already agreed to do that analysis. Okay, that's the proposed conclusion. So thank you very much. So we have done with another working group document, and we can now move on to the agenda item 31, which is West African vultures, and I give the floor to the Secretary to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. The document was prepared by the Secretariat and provides an update since AC 32 on the implementation of decisions 19.92 to 19.196 on West African vultures, including information reported to SC 77. The Secretariat would like to highlight the following aspects addressed in the document. The 14th meeting of the Conference of Parties to CMS considered a document on African Eurasian vultures that included an update on the midterm implementation review of the CMS Multi-Species Action Plan to Conserve African Eurasian Vultures, the Vulture MSAP. The executive summary of the midterm review is included in Annex 2 to the present document. The MTIR concludes that many vulture populations are still declining at a precipitous rate in Africa, where data are especially scant and where monitoring is often difficult. The MTIR also includes an assessment of threats and concluded that the prioritization of threats as reflected in the vulture MSAP has not changed. According to this report, training for appropriate border control was identified as essential to help reduce both local and intra-African trade in vulture parts. This links to Decision 19.194, paragraph B, directed to the Secretariat to produce identification materials focusing on parts and derivatives of vulture species for use by law enforcement officials. Unfortunately, the Secretariat was not able to secure funding to implement this part of the decision. On 24 April 2024, the West African Vulture Conservation Action Plan was launched by CMS, BirdLife International and IUCN in collaboration with West African vulture range states. This regional action plan builds on the vulture MSAP. Taking into consideration the need to focus on priority actions, the Secretariat proposes that more focused decisions may assist parties, West African range states, the Secretariat, and intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations to make progress in addressing the threats posed to vultures in West Africa linked to CITES implementation. Clear reporting requirements will furthermore ensure that information is shared with the Secretariat prior to the Animals and Standing Committee meetings to inform reporting and decision-making. The Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendations contained in paragraph 16 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for the introduction to the document. I open the floor for comments from members. Observer parties. And observer organizations. I see CMS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Some quick remarks from the CMS Secretariat. We very much appreciate the continuous cooperation with CITES Secretariat and welcome this initiative of increasing the capacity of border controls on the unregistered and illegal trade of vulture parts. It's evident from recent market surveys, interviews, and from vulture surveys that the trade, both nationally and internationally, is still thriving and vulture populations continue declining. We are concerned that also international trade under CITES convention in the CMS Appendix-I taxa still continues. We therefore call on CITES, also through IQIC, and on CMS parties to increase border controls and to address the main driver of illegal killing and trade of vultures, which is the belief-based use of vulture parts. To this end, the CMS Secretariat invites the West African Range States and CITES Secretariat to implement the West African Vulture Conservation Action Plan, engaging with the traditional healers to identify alternatives to vulture parts, building on the positive experiences so far, and invites this international community to support West African countries in their efforts to this end. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, CMS. HSI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We note that we agree that the AC should adopt these draft decisions. We agree particularly the suggestion in point 14 that more focused decisions may help decision making. We'd also note that the concerns involving trade in West African vultures are not purely confined to West Africa. These are wide-ranging species throughout Africa. They have suffered declines in other areas and are traded in other areas, and that we may wish to recommend in future that the broad effects across their range be also examined. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, HSI. I don't see any more interventions, so I conclude that the Animals Committee agrees to the draft revised decision contained in the Annex III to the present document, and also agrees to submit these draft decisions to the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee for submission to the Conference of the Parties for consideration at its 20th meeting. So with this, I close this item and I move on to agenda item 35 on pangolins. I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. This document reports on the implementation of the decisions on pangolins that were adopted at COP19. The document summarises the information submitted by parties concerning the development and implementation of in-situ pangolin management and conservation programmes in response to notification to the parties 2024/22. And this is these responses are presented in Annex 1, sorry, not Appendix. The committee will recall from AC 32 that the Secretariat worked with the Species Survival Commission Pangolin Specialist Group of the International Union of Conservation for Nature, or IUCN, to develop conversion parameters for all pangolin species in collaboration with the pangolin range states that would enable the reliable determination of the number of animals associated with any quantity of pangolin scales seized. The final report was presented to the Animals Committee at its 32nd meeting in the Annex to document AC 32, Doc 31, but the report concluded that further data collection was needed before scale mass estimates for all lake pangolin species can be considered robust to derive the finalised conversion parameters. So the Animals Committee at its 32nd meeting invited the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group to provide an updated report for consideration at this meeting. The updated report can be found in Annex 2, and Chair, you may wish to give the floor to IUCN to provide a brief update on progress with this work. The document also provides revised data on scale mass for the 8 pangolin species, which can be found in the table in paragraph 13. So the Animals Committee is invited to consider the responses to the notification 2024/22, contained in Annex 1, and the conversion parameters presented in the table in paragraph 13. To agree that the conversion parameters presented in that table for Manus gigantea, Manus javanica, Manus pentadactyla, Manus tetradactyla, and Manus tricuspis can be used by parties in cases where national legislation demands that such information be provided for law enforcement and court purposes. Also, to submit the draft decisions in paragraph 18C to the Standing Committee for its consideration and onward submission to COP20. to invite parties to use the identification materials to support the identification of seized pangolin species at specimens at species level that are found in paragraph 17, to agree to prioritise pangolins in the mandate of the proposed Animals Committee Working Group on Identification Materials, should it be established after COP20, and finally to agree that Decision 19.239 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now give the floor to IUCN. As asked by the Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Data collection is ongoing and the Pangolin Specialist Group hope to be able to fill in the gaps as soon as possible, working with pangolin range states and other organisations. We encourage parties and other organisations to reach out to the Pangolin Specialist Group if they have specimens available, and we are happy to report to future Animals Committee meetings on the progress made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. That was nice and short. So I open the floor for any comments from members of the committee. To observer parties. I see Kenya. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. As reported in AC 33 document 35, 4 out of the 7 decisions adopted at COP19 are relevant to this committee. Decision 18.238, as renewed at COP19, calls for pangolin range states to take urgent steps to develop and implement in situ pangolin management and conservation programs to address the elements referred to in paragraph 10 of the resolution COM 17.10 as revised in COP19 and report to the Secretariat on implementation of the decision. Chair, we wish to report that Kenya is a range state for 3 species of pangolins, Manis gigantea, Manis triscuspis, and Manis temminckii, out of the 4 pangolin species that are found in Africa. We were, however, not able to respond to the notification to the parties number 2024/022 of January 2024, as at that time, we were still in the process of formulating our 5-year National Recovery and Action Plan for pangolins for the period 2024 to 2028, and we considered that we needed to first complete the process so that we could substantively report on the progress and share the finalized plan. Chair, we are happy to report that in consultation with the Species Survival Commission, a pangolin specialist group of the IUCN, we have finalized the preparation of the action plan, published it in June 2024, and we are now implementing it. Though outside the deadline for responding to notification to the parties number 2024/022, we will be sharing with the Secretariat a copy of the plan and reporting on its implementation. We would like to thank Fauna and Flora International and other parties for collaborating with us in preparation of the Pangolin Recovery and Action Plan. Chair, regarding implementation of Decision 18.239 as renewed at COP19, we are happy to report that we have contributed to its implementation by providing access to specimens of pangolin carcasses, scales, and skins for the species we have as materials for development of conversion parameters for those pangolin species. Chair, we note that additional materials are needed to further develop conversion parameters for Manis terminiki, and therefore support recommendation for the draft decision 20.AA in recommendation C of this document, and commit to support its implementation by providing such materials when they are available. Chair, we would also propose that
can you speed up a bit, because we still have the time limit in place, and you are already over 3 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I will now conclude. We would also propose that this committee consider, as part of recommendation C, an additional draft decision 20.cc, encouraging parties, intergovernmental organizations, and non-governmental organizations to support pangolin range states with resources, both financial and technical expertise, to implement the in situ pangolin management and conservation programs developed in response to decision 18.238. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Can you read that decision, please, out once more? So it would be directed to whom? To parties and organizations?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will read it. That an additional draft decision 20.cc, encouraging parties, intergovernmental organizations, and NGOs to support pangolin range states with resources, both financial and technical expertise, to implement the in situ pangolin management and conservation programs developed in response to decision 18.238. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we captured that. Thank you very much. I see now India. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India notes the document AC 33.35 and the decisions 18.238 and 18.239, including the new decisions 19.200 to 19.204 by the Secretariat. 2 species of pangolins are distributed in India, and both are protected under law. India has also excelled in ex situ breeding of Indian pangolin Manis crassicaudata, which has been useful in understanding biology of this cryptic and elusive species. Camera trap studies and in-country Caesar reports indicate wide distribution of the species in suitable habitats. The CITES Management Authority and the State Forest Departments are vigilant in combating the illegal trading of the species in the country. So India believes a precautionary measure may be taken in the conversion parameters for the pangolin species, but developed in accordance with the provisions of decision 18.239. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. I had the United States, and you had been called upon erroneously, so please press button again so that we can give you the floor. So, United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The U.S. supports all the recommendations in the document, and just a small note for clarity, we think it's decision 18.239 to be deleted, not 19.239. And additionally, we support the additional draft decision suggested by Kenya. We also emphasize at this time our serious concern about the illicit trade in pangolins and the need for immediate action to prevent their extinction. We call attention to AC 33 Information Document 23, posted online, which details actions that the U.S. will take to strengthen pangolin conservation. We encourage parties to join us in fully implementing CITES Resolution Conf 17.10 Rev Cop 19 on pangolins. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. And I give the floor now to Malaysia. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Malaysia would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the document AC33, Doc 35. We would like to draw attention to AC33, Doc 5, Annex 1, page 6 for amendment in column key aspect referred to in Res Corp 17.10, Rev Corp 19, paragraph 3. The Sabah Wala Department, SWD, has enhanced the protection status of the Sunda pangolin by classifying it as totally protected, Schedule 2 to be deleted, changed to Schedule 1 in legislation, and all forms of pangolin hunting are prohibited. Malaysia supports all the recommendations stated in paragraph 18, especially in small b on the conversion parameters, as this would aid prosecution with aggravating factors for severe penalties against offenders, and small d in building the capacity of enforcement officer on the ground to detect illegal trade of pangolin species. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. And I open the floor for observer organizations. I don't see any, so I will wrap up. Just a second. Oh, I see Cameroon. Cameroon, you have asked for the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Cameroon welcomes the work done by the Secretariat. We have 3 pangolin species and feel that there is an urgent need for action to be taken to slow the extinction of this species, which is subject to poaching throughout Cameroon, Gabon, and West Africa. We therefore welcome the proposals made by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Support. Now, give me a minute and I will wrap up. Okay, thank you very much. So the conclusion would be the Animals Committee agrees to the recommendations as contained in document AC33, Doc 35 in, where is it? In paragraph 18. With the amendment that under letter C, we will have submitted draft decisions in paragraph 17C and also submit the decision 20CC as proposed by Kenya to the Standing Committee for its consideration and onward submission to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. And there is that typo error in recommendation F to agree that decision 18.239 has been implemented. Okay, I don't see any opposition, so that's the decision of the committee on this matter. So now we can move on to the afternoon agenda with agenda 17, non-detriment findings for specimens of Appendix-II species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction. This document is introduced by the Secretariat. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC33, Doc 17 on non-detriment findings for specimens Appendix-II species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction, or ABNJ, so I don't repeat it every time I say it, provides overview of the work implemented by the Secretariat to organize a technical workshop under decisions 19.135 to 19.139. The Secretariat is grateful for the support by the European Union and the United Kingdom, which made the work possible. In accordance with Decision 19.135, the Secretariat issued a notification to the parties asking about their experience in making NDFs for specimens taken from ABNJ. Based on those responses, the NDFs that's been previously shared by parties, the outcomes of the NDF workshop, and results of consultations with secretariats of regional fishery bodies, the Secretariat prepared background documents. The Secretariat would like to thank all the parties that responded to the notification and to all the RFB Secretariats and FAO for their support. The technical workshop was held in Geneva in April from 25th through 26th, and the workshop discussed challenges in making NDFs for specimens taken from ABNJ, the data and information needs, as well as cooperation between authorities when making such NDFs. The Secretariat is grateful to all those that presented and participated in the workshop. Based on the discussions, the workshop submitted recommendations for consideration by the Animals Committee, which are contained in paragraph 16. In addition to the recommendations, the workshop agreed to share with the Animals Committee a list of observations, which are shown in Annex 3 to the document. The discussions also raised several implementation challenges, and all of those are compiled in Annex 4 to the document. The report of the technical workshop, which includes a summary of the discussions at the workshop, is available as information document AC33 Inf 1 in English, and the Spanish and French versions will be available in the coming weeks. The Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendation in paragraph 19. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I see Oceania has asked for the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As the Animals Committee lead on this topic, I thank the Secretariat very much, especially Hyung Jung Kim and Tia Carroll, for all the work they did convening the very successful workshop held in April this year in Geneva, which is a renowned maritime city, and also for their preparation of this report. I also like to thank Dr. Christopher Rogers, who did the technical review as background for the workshop. The technical workshop did a deep dive into the challenges posed in doing NDFs for specimens taken on the high seas, or ABNJ, and this complemented the work already done by the Aquatic Species Workstream, and also touched on the work done by the Migratory Species and Transboundary Populations Workstream at the Nairobi NDF workshop. Given the close linkages between this agenda item and the NDF item 16 that we discussed last week in the joint PC-AC meeting, I support recommendation 16 that invites the Secretariat to append the outcomes of the workshop on non-detriment findings for specimens of Appendix-II species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction, and the Animals Committee's deliberation to the CITES NDF guidance for aquatic species. But also perhaps to also append the guidance to that of the Migratory Species and Transboundary Populations module as well. And then integrate those points into any updated versions of the guidance. Recommendations 16A, well, all of the recommendations of 16A through to K seem relevant, except that in recommendation 16C, about the interpretation of the term international scientific authorities, I suggest that throughout the document the term international experts replace international scientific authorities, and the alternative wording we find in there occasionally is international authorities. This term is used in paragraph 1, Roman 10, capital E, in Resolution Conf 16.7, RevCop 17 on NDFs, and it would make it clearer that these international sources of information, such as FAO, regional fisheries bodies, and regional research institutions or universities, are quite distinct from the scientific authorities of individual parties. So I also support recommendation 16E that implementation matters provided in Annex 4 are passed on to the Standing Committee for its consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. Any other member? Oops. North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for organizing the technical workshop in April on NDFs for Annex 2 species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction, and thank those who participated in the workshop. We also wish to acknowledge the informative background documents that was prepared to inform the discussion at the workshop. The exchange of information there was constructive, and we supported the recommendations of the workshop in paragraph 16 of AC document 17. Concerning the observations of some parties and observer organizations at the technical workshop, the North American region supports having the Animals Committee note these observations. The Animals Committee submission to the Standing Committee. The North American region also supports the Animals Committee making recommendations on this issue to the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee for their consideration as appropriate. And then for future work, the North American region suggests the Animals Committee note that decision 19.135 and 19.136 have been completed. At this time, we do not see a need for the Animals Committee to undertake additional work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. I give the floor now to observer parties. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for this comprehensive report of the workshop. I just had a reaction to the suggestion from Oceana related to paragraph 16C regarding international scientific authorities. That was a specific discussion at the workshop in terms about the language in Article 4.7, and we suggest that the text as it's written here should remain, because it was a question about international scientific authorities in the context of the convention text, and think it should remain. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I see Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Japan would like to express its appreciation to the Secretariat for the preparation of the document. And Japan also would like to appreciate all the efforts made by the participants in the technical workshop held in Geneva this April. Regarding the recommendation in paragraph 16C, Japan would like to support the intervention by United States. And Japan thinks that we had a very practical discussion on NDF for specimens of Appendix-II species taken from ABNJ during the workshop. And actually, Japan supports the recommendations described in the paragraph 16 of Doc 17, which were made at the technical workshop. However, Japan has a comment on the observation of the workshop in the Annex 3, which texts were not fully discussed at the plenary of the workshop. So in the section B, paragraph 5, it is stated that catch quota could be set for fishing in the EEZ and ABNJ based on the NDF. However, Japan understands that NDF is required to advise whether the trade is not detrimental to the survival of that species for CITES Appendix 1 or 2 listed species, and that NDF is not conducted to establish catch quota. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So now I have Argentina. Argentina, you have the floor. Can you press the button again, please? Now you are on.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to refer to the workshops on NDFs for specimens listed in Appendix-II, which are captured in areas beyond national jurisdiction. There was discussion of the current roles of RFMOs and other bodies in terms of making information available to CITES, scientific authorities that carry out NDFs. And we would like to repeat our position that RFMOs are not the only existing bodies for the conservation of species in the high seas. That as long as the political and legal situation of the areas allows that. They are made up of a group of states that does not represent the international community as a whole, so they lack the capacity to be able to draw up binding rules for those states that are not members of the areas. So it's difficult to establish relations with states that are not part of the bodies. And those states cannot either take on the representation of the rest of the international community, nor work on the other changeable regulations. These bodies have a defined mandate because of the scope of their competence, which is the management of fleets and fishing activities, but they cannot have governance over areas of the high seas, but they can work on the management of the fishing resources that they are dedicated to working with. So NDFs must be carried out by the member states and the parties of CITES, and that the RFMO only applies to those states that are parts of the organization. So we cannot support any language that refers to any binding nature for states that are not part of the RFMO in question. We also sustain that RFMOs are not the only relevant source of data. We cannot support paragraph 5F, where there is a mention of national sites. In the non-binding structures, it is not possible to say if the expression is correct, if it does not have a competence on the state, if there has not been a legally binding agreement. So in the notes on the technical workshop, there's talk about shared stocks, or when we're talking about transitional and migratory stocks. First of all, we must recall that our country did not ratify the application of the provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and reference to populations of highly migratory fish, which was adopted in 1995 in New York and is named as the New York Agreement. I am concluding now. We would highlight that the transzonal and shared stocks are not able to be included in that. The shared nature is biological rather than legal. So there's a determination of where those from a certain geographic zone are falling under a certain fishing area. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Thank you, Argentina. I think I've heard what you are saying. It's just that we are not adopting anything here. What we are doing, we are noting these recommendations and these observations. So we have taken your point as a general statement that we have taken, that we have heard and noted. Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. I see Senegal. Senegal, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Senegal welcomes and appreciates the organization of the technical workshop for important matters related to NDFs for specimens taken from ABNG. In terms of the recommendations from the workshop on page 4 are good, and the recommendations 16A and B, which talk about significant trade and the need to look in greater detail at NDFs on a stock level and not just from simply from introduction from the sea or from a particular state. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. And lastly, UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks the Secretariat for this document and for their excellent organisation of the workshop on non-detriment findings for Appendix-II species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction. We also recognise that the Module 5 report from the NDF workshop supports this work. Following discussions at the workshop in April, important recommendations were agreed, and we support these and agree with the US to retaining international authorities, as these were specific to the discussions. We also note the thematic observations. There's a lot to consider here and much to be done. In relation to the conservation of sharks and rays, notably, we believe it is especially important to strengthen CITES implementation for specimens taken in ABNJ, which could address a significant proportion of underreported trade, a source of mismatch identified in the second Missing Sharks report found in Annex 5 of AC33, Doc 41 on sharks and rays. We recognise that collectively parties are still a distance from establishing how to make effective NDFs from specimens taken by vessels flagged to multiple states in ABNJ. And bearing this in mind, we recommend that the Standing Committee considers the implementation challenges raised in Annex 4 of the document at SC 78. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. I open the floor for observer organizations. Seeing none, I will try to wrap up. Give me a minute. Okay, thank you very much. So my conclusion is that the Animals Committee agrees to all recommendations in paragraph 16 of document AC33 Doc 17 for consideration by the Standing Committee and notes the observations of the workshop in Annex 3 to the document. Okay, I don't see any opposition to that. So with this, we also close that document, and we move on to document 30, aquatic species listed in the appendices. Also, for the Secretary to introduce, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The next document, document AC30, Doc 30, on aquatic species listed in the CITES Appendices, provides overview of work implemented by the Secretariat to organize a technical workshop under Decisions 19.189, to 19.191. This was made possible by the generous financial contribution by the European Union, and the Secretariat is grateful. To support the work of the technical workshop, 2 documents were prepared. First, the background document titled Variability of Life History Parameters and Productivity in Elasmobranchs and Other Commercially Exploited Aquatic Species, and a second document titled An Overview of the Processes to Date on the Criteria for the Amendment Appendices 1 and 2. The Secretariat thanks FAO for their collaboration and support on the background document to the workshop. The technical workshop was held in Geneva from 23rd to 24th April, and the workshop generally agreed that Resolution Conf 9.24, Rev Cop 17, and its footnote 2 provides sufficient flexibility to apply it to relevant commercially exploited elasmobranchi and other aquatic species. In accordance with Decision 19.189, the technical workshop submitted recommendations for consideration by the Animals Committee in paragraph 10. The Secretariat has implemented paragraph 10C, which invited the Secretariat to provide a collation of work done on the implementation of the criteria that has been considered by the COP, and it presents the collation in Annex 2 to the document. In addition to the recommendations, the workshop agreed to share with the Animals Committee the observations contained in paragraph 12. The report of the technical workshop capturing the discussion is available as information document AC33 in 3 in English, and the French and Spanish versions will be available in a few weeks. The Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendation in paragraph 13 of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments from members. North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region wishes to thank the CITES Secretariat for organizing a successful technical workshop in fulfillment of Decision 19.189 on the application of Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev COP 17 with regards to relevant commercially exploited elasmobranchi and other aquatic species. The North American region would like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that was undertaken by the Secretariat to prepare a comprehensive document outlining the work to develop and amend the criteria for amendment of Appendices 1 and 2 over time. We also wish to acknowledge the very informative background report that was prepared for the workshop on the variability of life history parameters and productivity in elasmobranchs and other commercially exploited aquatic species. The North American region supports the Animals Committee's consideration of recommendations in paragraph 10 of AC 33 document 30. With regard to the recommendations in this paragraph, we support recommendations in paragraph 10A through 10C. However, we do not believe it is necessary to undertake additional work as called for in paragraph 10D through 10E. The North American region believes the existing guidance and work under paragraphs 10A through 10C are sufficient and helpful. In addition, we do not see the need to expend additional limited resources on new decisions, development of further guidance, or definition of the term commercially exploited aquatic species as proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, North America. I see Oceania.
Thank you, Chair. Again, as one of 4 Animals Committee members who attended this workshop, I'd like to thank the Secretariat for their really hard work putting this all together, and especially commissioning Dr. Enrique Cortez to do that detailed background document that North America referred to. Most participants at the workshop agree that the current Resolution 9.24 footnote 2 in Annex 5 regarding the application of decline for commercially exploited aquatic species provides sufficient clarity and flexibility for parties proposing amendments to the CITES appendices for sharks and rays. And these criteria have also been successfully applied to a range of other taxonomic groups. The criteria also seem clear enough and flexible enough to allow parties to assess such listing proposals. More work could be done to develop more guidance and build capacity to understand how the current criteria can be applied, and we see that in recommendation 10B. I also agree with North America that recommendations A through C are worthy of maintaining. In regard number D, in terms of determining a possible decision to go to the next conference of the parties, I had actually drafted some text which I shared with the Secretariat. One was to make available a copy of the background paper by Dr. Enrique Cortez, which appears in Annex 1 of this paper, to make that available on the Sharks and Rays portal of the CITES website. I'm told by the Secretariat that they are able to do that tomorrow, or let them do it next week. Maybe they'll be busy tomorrow. So yeah, that's irrelevant. And the other part that I had put in a draft decision was to include information on the application of footnote 2 of Annex 5 on commercially exploited aquatic species when developing general capacity building materials. That's covered in paragraph 10B, but this would, having it in a draft decision would make it more ongoing rather than just a one-off. And so it may have merit to have a very short, succinct decision addressed to the Secretariat to keep that up to date as long as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. I now open the floor for observer parties. I see Japan.
Thank you, Chair. And Japan would like to express its appreciation to the Secretariat for the preparation of the documents. Japan has 3 comments under this agenda item. First, Japan supports the general agreement at the workshop that Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev COP 19 and its footnote 2 provide sufficient flexibility to apply it to relevant commercially exported sharks and rays and other aquatic species, and do not require text amendment or clarifications as described in the paragraph 9 of the AC 33 Doc 917 of this document. And second, with respect to the paragraph 10D, Japan also believes that there is no need to develop further guidance on the application of the Resolution Conf 9.24 and its a footnote to sharks and rays and other aquatic species, because the workshop generally agreed that clarification of the resolution is not required, as I mentioned earlier. And also, according to the Annex 2 of the document, COP16 concluded that it is not possible to provide guidance on the application of Annex 2A criterion B in Resolution Conf 9.24, so that Japan is very much concerned that the development of new guidance will not be completed again, and it will be a painstaking task for the Secretariat. And finally, regarding the definition of the term commercially exploited aquatic species in the paragraph 10E, Japan supports the use of the definition provided by FAO at the workshop as follows. Commercially exploited aquatic species refer to fish, invertebrate species found in marine environments or in large freshwater bodies and subject to commercial exploitation. And fish refer to fish, crustacean, mollusks, and other aquatic animals, excluding mammals, reptiles, and as well as seaweeds and other aquatic plants. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I open the floor to Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. We are pleased with having taken part in the technical workshop on aquatic species listed in the CITES appendices, and we are reassured to hear that other parties share our concerns in terms of interpretation. At COP19, we presented a document on the manner in which we look at the listing of aquatic species. And this is a recurring problem. The footnote on aquatic species in resolution conf 9.24 is linked to Appendix-II, and in terms of commercial trade. And many shark species were able to be added to the appendices only once there was work, and the regional fisheries bodies had already set up strict measures. As a consequence, the parties are facing practical difficulties in implementing the CITES provisions in terms of, for instance, trade that is sustainably managed, and some species that are of weak and low production can be difficult. So we have remarked that the FAO expert group applies the most strict interpretation to all the species evaluated. And this has led us to have very high requirements in terms of shark, and ensuring that a proposal for listing in CITES is appropriate, and whether a species is already classified under IUCN as critically endangered or endangered, and that this has an impact with certain fisheries. And this is worrying because it's the second group of vertebrates that are most threatened on the planet. We don't want to reopen Resolution Conf 9.24, and we agree that the footnote 2 has sufficient flexibility to cover the species. The proposal on Calcarinidae at COP19, which we co-sponsored, showed that parties had demonstrated the need for this flexibility. There is a request to take into account the matters linked in paragraph 10, and those recommendations look at the listing and calls for a summary of work that has been made and to ensure it is made available on the CITES website. This has been provided in Annex 2 to the document, and we can see that the interpretation of the footnote is similar to that which took place at the technical workshop, and that there was a need to consider the guidelines with flexibility. The information that we had shared with us by the Secretariat is on document 63 of COP15, and we would ask that be including here, and that we suggest that we transmit the recommendations from paragraph 10 as well as the summary report. Thank you.
I open the floor now to the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just very short. The UK aligns with the comments of North America. Thank you.
That was quick. Any other observer party wishing to take the floor? Observer organization, I see the Netherlands. Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I do actually also agree with that comment. We did have very, very intense conversations about the need for guidance. But I think, having read the document and the excellent collation of information from the Secretariat, that we have enough information to be able to take it further. It was a very important part of the workshop to have that discussion, but I also agree with removing 10D, little I and II. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the entirety is good. I see Panama. Panama, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I'll be brief. We also agree with what the Senegalese representative had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Observer organizations. So thank you very much. I will try to wrap up and come back in a second. I haven't heard any support for the proposed decision by the representative of Oceania to direct it to the Secretariat to include information on the application of footnote to Annex 5 on commercially exploited aquatic species when developing general capacity building materials on Resolution Conf 924 on the criteria of the amendment of the Appendices 1 and 2. I haven't heard any support, and if I don't get any support, I think you do not want this decision to go forward. So I would need some support. Okay, I don't see anybody supporting this one, and I do think we have had quite extensive discussion on that definition that fish are also mollusks, which as a zoologist hurts me, but for practical purposes it may make sense. But I don't see, I would also need to have some support, but I don't think we did get a agreement on that topic. So I don't see anybody supporting that definition for the moment. So I think now I have all the information I need. Okay, so the conclusion is that the Animals Committee agrees on recommendations in paragraph 10 of the document A to C and share that with the Standing Committee. And B, agree that decisions 19189 and 19190 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at COP20. Okay, I see nodding, so thank you very much. So with this, we now move to a mollusk or a fish. so we now talk about queen conch, agenda item 43, and I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. I think to keep everyone happy, we have a mollusk followed by fish in the agenda. So this document was prepared by the Secretariat and presents an update on the implementation of decisions 19.233 to 19.236 on queen conch, which have been carried out with thanks to the United States of America for providing funding. It provides an update on the outcomes of the 6th meeting of the Working Group on Queen Conch and the 19th session of the WCFC, or the Western Central African Atlantic Fishery Commission, in paragraphs 3 to 6. It is noted that the Regional Queen Conch Fisheries Management and Conservation Plan has been endorsed by all range states, but there has been limited progress in terms of its implementation. And as a result, many of the activities outlined in the decisions are either ongoing or remain to be implemented. The Secretariat is therefore of the view that it is important to continue this work and so proposes the renewal of these decisions. Paragraphs 7 to 11 provides an update on the development of simplified guidance for queen conch, which was carried out in collaboration with the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute, and in close consultation with experts from the Queen Conch Scientific and Statistical Technical Advisory Group, other independent experts and representatives from the Bahamas, Belize, Honduras, Jamaica, Grenada, Nicaragua, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. 2 hypothetical case studies on queen conch were conducted to test the process, and these were presented at the CITES NDF International Expert Workshop in December of 2023. The current final draft guidance is available in English and Spanish. It comprises a descriptive guidance document and an associated Excel file to facilitate the determination of a positive, negative, or conditional NDF. And this material can be found in Annexes 2 and 3 of the document. The Secretariat intends to conduct online training workshops in English and Spanish for all queen conch range states on the application of this NDF guidance, and range states will be invited to test the guidance in the field and provide feedback on its usefulness and any challenges faced, so that a final workshop can be held to discuss the findings and suggest possible improvements to the guidance. Secretariat also has funding to provide targeted support to a limited number of range states to test the guidance, and it will issue a notification inviting range states to indicate their interest in receiving targeted support, noting that priority will be given to range states that are trading or intend to trade in queen conch. Finally, paragraphs 12 to 17 provide an update on the pilot phase of the queen conch genetics project involving the University of Rhode Island and the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute. This pilot phase, which is partly funded by the Netherlands through the CITES Secretariat, explores the connectivity among conch populations using high-resolution genetic data, thereby identifying the unique genetic profile of each population. Importantly, this approach will provide the baseline information to trace the international trade in queen conch products and identifying those originating from IUU activities. The Secretariat reports it has secured some funding from the United States of America to contribute towards the next phase of this important project, but it is estimated that the next phase will take about 2 years and require approximately $250,000. So other parties are invited to consider providing additional funding. So, Chair, the Animals Committee is invited to note this report and propose the renewal of the decisions on queen conch to COP20. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee. I see North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region would like to thank the Secretariat for preparation of this document. Our region agrees with the Secretariat that it is important to continue the work called for in Decision 19.233 to 19.236 on Queen Conch, and that the Animals Committee and the Conference of Parties continue to monitor progress of their implementation. Therefore, we support the Secretariat's proposal to renew these decisions at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to CITES. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, North America, Central South America, and the Caribbean.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we also believe that the decisions 19.233 to 19.236 on Queen Conch, those decisions should be renewed, of course, and presented to the 20th Conference of Parties. I also agree that the regional Queen Conch Fisheries Management and Conservation Plan is ongoing. A lot of the activities and actions in this plan have not been implemented in many of our countries. And so I am recommending that funding is identified to help those countries that have not been able to implement the plan to do so, in order to do so. And this is especially relevant because we have learned recently that the United States has included the Queen Conch in its Endangered Species Act, which means that our countries need to be prepared with all of their information regarding their fishery, and because it is likely that further regulations will be put in place in the future. And so it would be good if the representative from the United States could give us some idea in terms of the time frame and what kinds of regulations may be introduced in the future, and and how these will affect the trade of Queen Conch with the United States. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Central South America and the Caribbean. I give the floor to Europe.
From what I've read, the Queen Conch project provides really important contributions to ensuring that this trade is sustainable. And I agree to propose the renewal of the decisions 19.233 to 236 to the COP20. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. I open the floor now to observer parties. I see the United States. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to the question about the domestic listing of the Queen Conch under the U.S. Endangered Species Act, we did make a decision in February of 2024 this year, and that species was listed as a threatened species under our domestic endangered species law. With its threatened listing, it provides an opportunity for us to put protections in place for that species through regulatory measures that can range from prohibiting any form of take, both intentional or incidental, as well as prohibitions on import and export of those species. We have, at this point, we're beginning a very cooperative process, and we are committed to working with the range states through regional fisheries bodies, as well as individual consultations with the range states as we develop any protective regulations that may apply. You can be rest assured that any regulations that apply to other parties will also have at least as strict, if not stricter, measures within the United States. I don't have a specific time frame on that. We are committed to having a very engaged collaborative process. So that will take some time, and we are beginning to engage in that process. And as we work through that, we will then have a better idea of what the time frame is once we determine what measures we think may be appropriate. We follow our regulatory process, which means there will be a proposed regulation that will be open to public comment, and then there will be a fair amount of time then to respond to and deliberate on any public comment that we receive before any regulation is final. Thank you.
Thank you to the United States. I think that has been quite clear and helpful. I don't see any other party wishing to take the floor, so I open the floor for observer organizations. So seeing none, the conclusion is that the Animals Committee notes the report and proposes the renewal of decisions 19233 to 19236 on queen conch, Strombus, gigas to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Now we are back to fishes. It's agenda item number 40 on marine ornamental fishes. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. This document prepared by the Secretariat presents the background information and the outcomes of the workshop on marine ornamental fishes that took place from the 7th to the 10th of May this year in Brisbane, Australia. The proceedings of the workshop can be found in Information Doc 8. Please note that 2 revised versions of the document were published, the first on the 13th of June to more accurately reflect the agreed outcomes from the workshop, and the second to update a hyperlink in the document and correct the omission of the United States NOAA as a donor. So we do apologise for this. The Secretariat is grateful to all of the donors, that's Switzerland, the United Kingdom and US NOAA for their generous contributions to this work, and of course to Australia for hosting the workshop. Paragraph A of decision 19.238 directed the Animals Committee to agree terms of reference for the technical workshop, and these terms of reference and modus operandi were agreed at the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee and can be found in Annex 1 of the present document. The objectives of the workshop are outlined in paragraph 6. Annex 3 of the document contains the workshop's observations on the nature and scale of the international trade in marine ornamental fishes, information exchange, best practices, biology, conservation priorities and management needs, livelihoods, areas of future research, potential options for future monitoring and miscellaneous observations. Annex 4 of the document contains a catalogue of over 2,000 fish species identified as being in international trade based on the various background documents that were prepared for the workshop. In paragraph 14, the workshop proposes 21 recommendations for consideration by the Animals Committee, and these recommendations pertain to the outcomes of the workshop, the recording of international trade, data accessibility, Appendix-III listings, IATA and IUCN guidelines, mentoring arrangements, the involvement of Indigenous peoples and local communities, conservation and management plans for marine ornamental fishes, best practices, an ecosystem approach, future IUCN Red List assessments, CITES NDF guidance, future research topics, information sharing, FAO's existing global fishery and aquaculture statistics basis, and the use of the nomenclature in Eschmeyer's catalogue of fishes. So as you can see, the workshop did a lot of work, and the Secretariat is very grateful to all of the participants, and particularly the industry who engage with the process very actively. The workshop also noted the offer from the University of Leeds and Roger Williams University to run a productivity sustainability analysis, or a PSA, on species from the catalogue found in Annex 4 to be shared with the Animals Committee, and this analysis is now available as Information Doc 29. So finally, Chair, the Animals Committee is invited to consider the points in paragraph 16 of the Rev 2 version of this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I would like to open the floor for comments from members of the committee. I see North America.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region would like to thank the Secretariat for this document and for helping to organize the technical international workshop on marine ornamental fishes in May. We would like to express our gratitude to the Government of Australia for hosting this workshop. Our region would also like to acknowledge the comprehensive review of international trade in non-listed marine ornamental fishes prepared by UNEPWCMC for the workshop. The North American region supports the recommendations that the Animals Committee note the observations from this workshop, which are presented in Annex 3 and in paragraph 14 of AC document 44. For the draft decisions, with respect to the draft decisions put forward by the Secretariat in AC document 44, the North American region appreciates the helpful suggestion and supports the decisions in concept. Our region does not oppose having the Secretariat monitor the development of any method or analytical tools to support prioritization of marine ornamental fish species. However, we suggest that it may be most appropriate and helpful for CITES parties to inform the Secretariat of such developments so that the Secretariat can report to the Animals Committee. Therefore, the North American region would like to suggest an amendment to the draft decision AA as follows. In decision 20.AA, insert, CITES parties are encouraged to inform before the Secretariat. Strike, shall monitor, and replace with the word of, and then delete all text following the end of the parentheses in the draft decision. The new 20 AA would read as follows. 20 AA, CITES parties are encouraged to inform the Secretariat of the development of any methods or analytical tools to support prioritization of species of marine ornamental fishes, example, productivity, sustainability analysis, or other variability analyses, fish base. The North American region also proposes new decision BB as follows. 20 BB, the Secretariat shall report any developments from decisions 20 AA to the Animals Committee as appropriate. The next bullet would be, with this proposed change, the current drafted decision of 20 BB would become decision 20 CC, and the reference to decision 20 AA in this paragraph would be changed to decision 20 BB. Perhaps CITES Secretary could reflect this minor change. With regard to the Secretariat's recommendation that decision 19237 and 19238 have been implemented and can be deleted, the North American region is in agreement and supports this recommendation. We sincerely hope these draft revisions are helpful and welcome others' views. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. I think that makes quite a lot of sense. it sets out a clear process how work on this matter or information on this matter is gathered by whom and who does what. So thank you very much. I see anybody else from the members? I see Europe. Europe, you have the floor.
I think I want to support the proposal made by North America.
Thank you, Europe, for that support. I see Israel has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank Australia for organizing and hosting this workshop, and also to the Secretariat for enabling me to attend it online and not have to travel to Australia, although it took place from 2 till 10 a.m. every day. But it was a fascinating workshop, and I'm glad I was able to attend, so thank you. One of the interesting aspects of this workshop was the production of a list of 2,000 species that are in international trade. And then the question is, okay, which ones of these are possibly candidates for listing in the appendices? And I've had this discussion with the chair and with some other parties, and certainly the Animals Committee is not going to take the mandate of going over many, many species that are not CITES listed and trying to make this adjustment. So it's basically the result of the workshop comes back to the parties to be able to look at these species and start thinking about which species need to be possibly listed. This is not really comes out in the recommendations that came out of that are drafted here in a paragraph 16 of the document. So we would like to suggest perhaps a couple of slight changes to the decisions. First of all, on the suggested text by the North American representative, we agree with that text, just since that text that he read is directed to the parties, so the title should be directed to the parties and not to the Secretariat, of course. And of course, and so other changes. We have 2 proposed draft decisions, also directed to the parties. I will read them, and I sent them to the Secretariat. Basically, what they say in the first one is to implement the recommendations of paragraph 14 of the document 44. So I'll read it, and as I said, I sent it to the Secretariat, so they have the text. Parties are urged, where possible, to implement the recommendations in paragraph 14 of AC 33 Doc 44 Rev 2, especially subparagraph F on recording international trade in marine ornamental fishes at the species level, and subparagraph U on making use of FAO's existing global fishery and aquacultural statistic databases to capture harvest and aquaculture data on marine ornamental fishes. So basically it quotes those 2 subparagraphs F and U. One is on recording the trade at the species level, and the other is actually where to record the capture data on marine ornamental fishes. And that would be, I guess, 20 cc in the list of proposed decisions. And the last proposed decision would be to take what I said about taking the list and possibly thinking about which species might be appropriate. So this is also directed to the parties are urged to review the catalog of marine ornamental fishes in international trade identified by the workshop in Annex 4 and identify species of high priority which may warrant further research or which could be submitted to the Conference of the Parties for possible listing in the appendices. So those are the 2 draft decisions we would propose to the parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel, for these proposed decisions. I mean, it would make what the working group suggested parties to do a bit more binding, but I have a bit concerns with the wording of urged. So I do think if you want parties really to consider this, then it would rather be encourage parties or invite parties depending on whatever you want. So we have I see the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Apologies, Chair. I'll get used to the microphone on the last day. First of all, thank you to Australia for hosting the workshop, and we welcome the outputs of the Marine Ornamental Fishes workshop and support the recommendations outlined in paragraph 14, and also agree that the decisions 19.237 and 19.238 have been implemented and can be deleted. We recognise that with ever-increasing agendas, it's prudent to focus on taxa that are already listed on CITES. However, we are cognizant that it is important that we do not lose the momentum so far gained through the considerations of that workshop, and that further work is undertaken to agree a methodology to identify from the catalogue of fishes a subset of species that may benefit from further research. And where necessary, appropriate future management actions. In this regard, we'd like to thank the Secretariat for drawing parties' attentions to InfDoc 29, a report on using the productivity susceptibility analysis to estimate vulnerability of marine aquarium fish, which we consider is a robust, adaptable, data-limited fishery assessment that might help effectively identify priority species in the marine aquarium trade. To this end, we encourage continued engagement on the topic and support the draft decisions in paragraph 16D, and to borrow the North Americans region, the concept of those draft decisions. I hesitate to come in because at this point I was going to recommend some amendments to those draft decisions as well, but we already have two sets of alternative amendments, and I think the point that I was trying to make was to ensure that these draft decisions were crafted to enable the committee to take forward any additional work it deemed necessary, and it may be that that has already been captured by what's been proposed by the North American regional representative and Israel. But to be honest, unless I see it written down, I don't know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. So I hear support for the draft decisions as proposed by Israel as well.
I really didn't manage to get them down in their entirety, and therefore I wasn't quite sure whether it captured that. But
okay, because in basically what they are asking, what they are formalizing, is that parties are encouraged to look at the recommendations coming out of that workshop and the analysis of the species in trade, and considering making proposals, listing proposals. So that's basically what these two decisions from Israel are suggesting, and I will need to hear some more about, and also support for these draft decisions, to be able to conclude that the Animals Committee would like to have them going forward to the Standing Committee. I see Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, Indonesia would like to convey its highest appreciation to the Secretariat, donors, especially to Australia, as hosts for the conducting of the event. As colleagues are aware, Indonesia was very keen to host the event in Bali on November 2023. However, since the event was moved to February 2024, Indonesia unfortunately had to withdraw from hosting the event due to our presidential election done during those times. Hence again, Indonesia very much appreciates Australia and other parties, including the Secretariat, for your kind consideration. During the workshop, Indonesia presented our lessons learned and best practices for the sustainable management of marine ornamental fishes. This includes the use of same units and terms for marine ornamental fish exports between MA CITES, Customs and Trade Ministry, and best practices in conservation and sustainable management of marine ornamental fishes based on community. Indonesia prioritized the principle of conservation in the use of fisheries resources and balances with economic potential, especially for livelihood-dependent communities. With regard to the result of the workshop, Indonesia hopes that species prioritization is carried out on species that, in addition to considering the status of vulnerability, also have high demand by many countries or globally, and that the study involves scientific authorities in range states. And to conclude, we would like to support the suggestions to the draft recommendation conveyed by the representative of North America, while for other suggestions, we believe we need more time to consider those suggestions. Additionally, we also support Chair's view to maintain the text in encouragement level as general principle. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. And I think it's quite confusing what kind of decisions are now there, and especially the wording. So my suggestion would be that the Secretariat prepares a document with all those suggested changes for everyone to digest, to look at, and then finalize them tomorrow in the morning, if possible. So I think that would be a good way forward, to have something to really chew on. I see Australia, you have asked for the floor. Before giving, oh no, okay, Australia, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. Australia is pleased to have hosted the technical workshop on marine ornamental fish, and would like to thank those parties and observers who attended both personally and virtually. I think personally I can definitely empathise with needing to attend CITES events in the middle of the night. We hope that the attendees enjoy their time in Australia and were able to see some of our more unique wildlife. We would just like to support the amendments made by the North American regional representative and by Israel. It would be good to see them in writing, though, before we make a final decision on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. And before I give the floor to the United States, can maybe UK, if you have had changes to the decisions, if you have your own ones, please send them also to the Secretariat, so we can really see to have a good set of all those suggested changes, okay? Thank you very much. I see United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports Israel's suggestion, but as others have noted, would like to see the language, so we agree with your suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I now open the floor to observer organizations. I see FAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I too want to thank Australia for hosting and for CITES for organising an event to stimulate a discussion and bring the community around a talk about marine ornamental fish. I have a rhetorical question, Chair. Are CITES parties really going on a search for potential species that could possibly be considered for listing when there are so many commercially exploited aquatic species on Appendix-II that presently are not receiving CITES provisions due to a lack of resourcing to support implementation, especially for countries struggling with the extra burden of CITES reporting, including for legal and sustainable trade in lookalike species? Thank you.
Thank you, FAO. I see the European Pet Organization, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the floor. And we would like to extend our thanks to you for your contribution to CITES during your tenure. I am also speaking on behalf of Ornamental Fish International, the Ornamental Aquatic Trade Association, the Sustainable Users Network, Pet Advocacy Network, and the Pet Industry Association of Australia. We would like to extend our thanks to the Secretariat and to Australia for hosting the technical workshop on marine ornamental fishes. The workshop highlighted the value of marine ornamental fisheries for conservation and providing sustainable livelihoods around the world. The workshop also recognised the value of further assessments like those presented in Inf Doc 29, and for some of the species in trade, however, for some of these species identified in trade, however, it was unable to decide which species warranted further assessment and which fisheries management needs were of species that might be identified as vulnerable to international trade. We are concerned that AC33 document 44 represents a process being started which identifies knowledge gaps for species but leaves work unfinished despite considerable resources invested into this process by the Secretariat, parties, experts and industry. Furthermore, the current decisions risk appropriate management measures not being explored due to a lack of clear direction for further research. We therefore support the adoption of the recommendations and the intervention by the UK, and support the establishment of an intersessional process to further assess marine ornamental fishes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Pet Organization, and I have Franz Weber Foundation.
This intervention is on behalf of Fondation Franz Weber and a number of organizations which will be provided to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for developing document 44 on the outcome of the workshop on the trade of marine ornamental fishes. There is an urgent need to monitor this trade in all parts of the world. In our recent scientific peer-reviewed publication, an updated review of the marine ornamental fish trade in the European Union, we analyzed data from the Trade Control and Expert System traces from 2014 to 2021. The EU is the largest known importer in terms of value and imported 26 million specimens from 1,452 species from 120 families coming from 61 countries. Very few of these species reproduce in captivity in commercial numbers. We note with concern that 30% of the EU's traces data and most data from the United States Law Enforcement Information Management System, or LEMIS, database currently do not collect import data on marine ornamental fishes at species level. This data is critically important as data for most of the rest of the world, especially China and the Asia-Pacific region, is not available. Monitoring and reporting are crucial if we are to address this trade. For example, critically endangered sharks are being imported to Europe as marine ornamentals, including 93 scalloped hammerheads Sphyrnolevini over our 8-year study period. We recommend a closer look at the live trade in sharks and rays in this trade. In sum, we encourage the parties to continue this work and to adapt the draft decisions proposed by North America and Israel to ensure we continue our efforts to monitor and protect, where necessary, these highly traded fishes, and urge the EU and the US to adapt their monitoring systems to collect all imports at species level. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz Weber Foundation, and I see IWMC.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to maybe repeat myself a little, but following what we heard from FAO and the statement made several times on the workload for CITES, Secretariat and the committees and the parties, I have a little of the feeling that we are once more here with a subject which is looking essentially at species that are not listed in CITES, and maybe we'll have to see if the committee, the Animals Committee or the Secretariat have available the necessary means to carry out all that is requested in this document without taking away from the importance of the subject. But I think the role of CITES is to deal with species that are listed in the appendices and not to prepare documents for the listing of some of these species. Thank you.
Thank you, IWMC, for these caution words. Okay, so I think for the moment what we know is that we agree on all the recommendations in paragraph 16, but we have not concluded on letter D, the draft decision to be submitted to the 20th meeting of the conference, and for this purpose we will have a COM document that will propose a collation of the different decisions proposed, and we will be able to look at that tomorrow morning. So for the moment the document is still pending, and we come back to it tomorrow morning. So with this, I would now open agenda item 39, Songbird Trade and Conservation Management, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to present that document.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC33 Doc 39 was produced by the Secretariat and updates the Animals Committee on the implementation of Decision 18.256 Rev COP 19 on songbird trade and conservation management. The Secretariat would like to thank Sweden and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for their generous contributions that enabled the Secretariat to implement the decision, including the preliminary study and an in-person technical workshop held in Bangkok, Thailand from 11 to 14 December 2023. The Secretariat is pleased to note that it was able to sponsor the attendance at the workshop of representatives from 8 parties from Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Oceania. The background study, undertaken by BirdLife in collaboration with the Secretariat, is available at the link to the workshop webpage provided in the document. The observations from the workshop are presented in Annex-II to the document, and the report on the results of the workshop is available as information document AC33 Inf 9. Challenges identified during the workshop include the lack of quantitative data on trade in and captive breeding of non-CITES listed songbird species, their evolving taxonomy and species identification. The workshop noted the importance of correct identification of songbird species in trade, where possible down to subspecies or geographically distinct varieties, to ensure preservation of natural genetic diversity. Therefore, the Animals Committee is invited to prioritize songbirds in the mandate of an Animals Committee working group on identification materials, should one be established after COP20. Concerning captive breeding and marking, the workshop noted that smaller species of songbirds may suffer mortality from attempted ringing or other marking procedures. The Animals Committee is therefore invited to consider how the handling of birds impacts their well-being in the context of the review of Resolution Conf 8.13 Rev COP 15 on the use of coded microchip implants for marking live animals in trade. The Animals Committee is further invited to note the preliminary study and the workshop report, as well as the observations from the workshop as presented in Annex 2 to document AC33 Doc 39, and to consider the recommendations contained in paragraphs 15 to 23, taking into account the comment in paragraph 25. Finally, with the submission of the preliminary study and the results of the workshop for its consideration, the Animals Committee is invited to agree that Decision 18.256 Rev COP 19 and Decision 18.257 Rev COP 19 have been implemented and that they can be proposed for deletion at COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now open the floor for comments from members. I see Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Secretariat, especially Karen Gaynor and Remco van Mem, for all the work they've done on this topic in convening the very successful hybrid technical workshop in Bangkok, and also preparing this report and also commissioning the very useful background report from BirdLife International. The observations in Annex 2 and the recommendations in paragraphs 15 through 23 provide the Animals Committee and parties with a wealth of material to guide future work on this topic. The priority list of 204 species in Annex 3 is worthy of attention by parties to determine whether any warrant the development of CITES listing proposals or warrant proposed changes to the CITES appendix that they currently are listed in, or to lead to the introduction of new domestic or regional conservation and management measures for those species. I draw particular attention to Annex 5, which lists 34 endangered or critically endangered species of songbird that have been recorded in international trade. Most of these species were excluded from the original shortlist of 22 species in BirdLife's preliminary review because few specimens were known to be in international trade. However, for these species on the brink, even a very small number of individuals in international trade, including scientific specimens collected from the wild, could be critical to the survival of the species in the wild. So I urge parties to take a very close look at the list of these 34 species and, where appropriate, consult with other range states with the aim of considering the merits of proposing suitable candidate species for inclusion in the CITES appendices of forthcoming conferences of the parties. I agree that decisions 18.256 RevCop 19 and 18.257 RevCop 19 will have been completed by the end of this meeting and can be deleted. But I also believe that decision 18.259, which was directed to parties and non-parties and others to provide funding to implement the current decisions, has also been completed. I would hope, though, that all the work done to date will not just end here, and that parties will pick up the ball and look closely at the species in the appendices here, and or that we develop a decision along the lines that we heard for the marine ornamental fish workshop, just to keep this songbird issue alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. I have North America.
Thank you, Chair. The North American region supports the proposal to delete decisions 18256 to 18257 RevCop 19 at COP 20. The North American region wishes to encourage parties when considering the recommendations of the working group as found in paragraph 15 to 23 of this document to do so, taking into consideration the longer list of 162 songbird species identified by BirdLife International study rather than the short list of only 22 species. First, 15 of the 22 identified priority songbird species are from South and Southeast Asia, while 4 were identified from Africa and 3 from the Americas. Most work surrounding songbird trade and conservation management has been focused in South and Southeast Asia, despite the urgent need for information acquisition on songbird species and their trade in Africa and the Americas. We feel that the long list containing 26 species of the African and 60 species of the Americas better reflects the breadth of songbird species in need of further examination in these relatively understudied regions. Second, each region faces its own unique drivers of demand as well as conservation challenges and priorities. The greater number of species separated and considered by region in the longer list ultimately foster more opportunity for broader yet targeted cooperation at the regional level, potentially maximizing the positive impacts of well-informed conservation decision-making for songbirds. Third, as reiterated by BirdLife International several times in the proceedings reports, their methodology in determining the short list of 22 species is only one of many possible approaches. Therefore, the short list of 22 is unlikely to be wholly reflective of songbird species likely to be at greatest risk from global trade. We welcome input and thoughts from others on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. I don't see any. I see Asia. Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. We acknowledge and appreciate all the preparing document as well as the great workshop that resulted the significant list that can be analyzed for further consideration of the parties. However, I have a concern regarding the recommendation 26 for Animal Committee, point E, of the use of the code microchip implant of marking live animal in trade. So it could be, there is only possibility to use others method that can be marking the animals that used for the trade, whether they come from the wild or whether they are captive breeding. So there would be other method that can be used, which is not, which is applicable. So since it's applicable, we probably it will be good. Thank you.
Okay, I now open the floor for observer parties. I see Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Malaysia would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing document AC33 Doc 39 and hosting the technical workshop last year in Bangkok, which Malaysia participated in. Malaysia support the recommendation to the Animal Committee in paragraphs 26, especially those stated in paragraph 26C. Referring to the paragraph 26E, echoing the comments by Asia representative, considering the behavior and welfare of songbirds and cost effectiveness, Malaysia suggests the use of ring installed with microchip or other methods recommended by Animal Committee or experts. This intervention also refers to document AC33, Doc 21, paragraph 9, prepared by the Secretariat, which will be discussed on Friday morning. In conclusion, this recommendation will significantly aid parties in better managing and conserving songbird in their respective countries. Additionally, parties can enhance the monitoring of both illegal and legal trade of songbirds, providing valuable insights into further measures needed to protect the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaysia, for that support. I don't see any other party asking for the floor, so I open the floor to observer organizations, and I see HSI.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is being made by HSI also on behalf of ADM Capital Foundation, Animal Welfare Institute, Born Free Foundation, Center for Biological Diversity, Fondation Franz Weber, Pro Wildlife, SSN, World Parrot Trust, WCS, and WWF. Thanks to the Secretariat for providing this important document and its annexes, and to BirdLife International for its valuable work on this issue, and to the sponsors and supporters of the Bangkok Songbird Workshop and its participants. The massive trade in songbirds, although it is the most serious threat to the survival in the wild of many species, has until recently been largely overlooked by this convention. We hope that this document will signal an increasing involvement by CITES in regulating a trade that has wiped out entire formerly abundant species and wild populations within a few years. For example, the highly distinctive Maratua race of the white-rumped Shama, which is a species listed on Appendix-II at the last meeting of the Conference of the Parties, has now been completely exterminated in the wild, apparently by the actions of only a few traders. Fortunately, a small colony survives at the Prigon Conservation Breeding Ark on Java, but it's not the only example. Although attention to this issue has largely been focused on Asia, including the work of the IUCN Asian Songbird Trade Specialist Group, the output of the Bangkok workshop demonstrate that this is a global problem and includes substantial international trade from Africa, South America, and other regions. While in some regions much of the trade is domestic, there is a significant and increasing international trade component, so the songbird trade is therefore very much CITES business. We therefore urge this committee to endorse the recommendations of the Bangkok workshop and of the Secretariat to recommend the development of a resolution on the international songbird trade incorporating these recommendations, as well as decisions as suggested by the representative from Oceania, and also to encourage parties to propose additional songbird species for the CITES appendices, including those on the priority and other lists as recommended by the delegate from North America. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, HSA. Hearing what we have heard so far, I think we would be able to conclude that matter in 5-6 minutes. So I'm asking the indulgence of the interpreters that if we can continue for 5-6 minutes.
Yes, sir, of course.
Thank you very much. So I give the floor to EASA.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank Sweden and the United Kingdom for their financial support to implement the decisions on songbirds. We furthermore thank the Secretariat for their work on the implementation of the decisions. EASA supports the recommendations from the technical workshop as outlined in paragraphs 15 to 23 of document 39. We would like to stress in particular the importance of building technical and financial capacity to handle seized and repatriated live songbirds as highlighted in paragraph 16C. As a founding contributor, we would also like to encourage parties to use and contribute to the Songbirds in Trade database as mentioned in paragraph 17F. Finally, Chair, and somewhat in alignment with previous interventions, given the excellent process and progress made, we think that now the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. With 162 songbird species identified where there is evidence of significant trade in wild-caught individuals, and a short list of endangered species as outlined as a priority for management and conservation action, we strongly encourage range states and other parties to review these species carefully and submit listing proposals to COP20 as appropriate. Our songbird experts are happy to support parties in this process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EASA. I have BNA/EV.
Thank you, Chair. BNA thanks the Secretariat for providing the document in the context of the discussion on Decision 19.197 on identifying information on species at risk of extinction affected by international trade, and in particular on the priority list provided in Annex 5, AC 33, Doc 39. BNA would like to share additional information that might be helpful to understand the context of international songbird trade. We have compared the list in Annex 5 with public information on prevalence of the species in zoos and bird parks across Europe, as well as data of avian breeding societies in Germany. Of the 34 species listed as critically endangered or endangered and for which international trade may impact their conservation status, 5 species are kept and bred regularly among private breeders, and 8 species can be found in various zoos and bird parks, resulting in a list of 9 species in total. It therefore seems questionable that, as indicated under paragraph 8C of AC 33, Doc 39, Western Europe is a significant target of export, also because of an import ban in place since 2005 due to avian influenza. The magnitude of trade of these species seems to occur outside Western Europe. If more information is required, BNA would be happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you. So I give the floor as last to IWMC, and then I will wrap up.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Far be it from me to criticize any proposal or take a stance against animal well-being, but once again, we do have the sense that a great deal of what is envisaged in this document goes well beyond the provisions of the Convention and also represents a significant workload for the Secretariat and the committees. We do think that we perhaps need to think carefully about how CITES works and ensure that it concentrates on what it is mandated to do rather than in becoming involved in work that really could be better dealt with by others. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, IWMC. Okay, so my suggestion as a final outcome is that the Animals Committee notes the preliminary study and the workshop report, notes the observations from the workshop as presented in Annex-II of this document, supports the recommendations in paragraph 15 to 23, taking into account the comment in paragraph 25, agrees to prioritize songbirds in the mandate of an Animals Committee working group on ID materials should it be established after COP20, consider how the handling of birds impacts their well-being in the context of the review of Resolution Conf 813 on the use of coded microchip implants for marking live animals in trade, noting that there are also other methods for marking such birds. Agrees that decision 18256 RefCop 19 and 18257 RefCop 19 as well as 18259 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at COP20. And in relation to letter G, we have already made the decision in the joint meeting that such information and material as contained in that document will be put up on the CITES website in a dedicated section. So that has already been agreed, so we don't need to repeat that again. Okay, I don't see anyone disagreeing with that way forward. So with this, I would close that item and also close today's session. Thank you very much to the interpreters for your indulgence, and we meet again tomorrow morning. So thank you very much. We are moving well.